Why have I quit my job? Why have I, bought a van? And why am I going to drive around the country? Well, I'm passionate about the idea that you need to be heard. And I want to stitch these stories together across the states. We're going to find the commonalities, and it's going to be really an amazing experience, and I look forward to you joining me on the jar. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Mental Health Today. I'm your host, Ken Stearns, and it's been a hot minute. I was just realizing as I'm preparing my little intro talk here that it's been probably the longest break. I think it's 2 weeks since I've done a recording, or maybe just 1 and 2 weeks, and that's probably the longest we've done since March, recording, putting down more than 100 interviews. And I was just chatting with Frank, our next guest, and we were kind of remarking at how interesting it is to jump into this. And I was telling him I was being so filled, my cup, was really being so filled by all the guests that I just went crazy. And I've already logged more than 100 interviews since March, which is, just a ridiculous number for a podcast. Also, while I'm doing another podcast as a main show, and this is a side show, but I've just been completely swept up overboard by mental health. And as you saw in the video there, that's my travel show called The Jar Podcast, where I go to people's homes and interview them from a jar of questions, a bank of questions, of 444 questions. And that journey, after about halfway through my journey on that, I was at about 60 cities and a couple hundred interviews. I really felt the weight of the conversations around mental health that I had heard. And I was honestly very taken by surprise. And that led me to, and kind of inspire me to start this show so I could find out more about what's going on. And, for me, I only knew about traditional therapists and therapy. I had no idea really anything beyond that for mental health. And I didn't know the difference between a psychologist and a psychotherapist or anything else with a psycho in it. I was really that green. And I got to thank people like Frank for coming on, spending time, and kind of sharing their journey. Frank's a really interesting guest. Frank, you're going to be an interesting one because you're not you're not a doctor in this space. You don't have an app. You're not approaching this from any kind of these investment ways. You're just truly a really lived, experienced human, and just trying to do your part. And I so admire that, doing it from, like I said, even starting off the mental health page that you've got on LinkedIn, growing to over 500,000 people who are clicked on there to subscribe and to follow the content, because that's how hungry we are for guidance. Welcome to the show, Frank. Thanks for taking time out of your evening there in New York.
It's an honor to be here, Ken, and I really want to salute you for what you're doing too, because you're giving voice to the various people. I listened to some of your episodes and I was just amazed. And thank you for giving me this forum. Well, we use the term love language,
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not being compensated for this. It's a side thing that I just felt was too important not to do. I had a long journey with mental illness. I lived in denial, lived sort of a double life. I was just in fear of, being seen as damaged goods, not being able to get a job, or perhaps being treated or perceived in different ways. So silence ruled the day. We didn't talk about mental illness openly very much. Back, I'm a child of the '60s, so we'll just put it right out
Yeah.
there. I turned 59 on Saturday, so that's who you're talking to. But even though I'm a person of the 20th century, as you can see from my background, flying my geek flag, I live in the future. I want to bring forth a future. I'm a grandfather now, and I find myself thinking about the decisions and the actions I'm taking now, and what will I bequeath to my grandson, and
Mm.
I want to put a human face on mental illness. I want to stand up and be counted so people say, look, wow, look at that guy. He seems to have it together. He maybe as an employer or what have you, I should take a second look there at folks with physical or invisible disabilities, just like we would a person perhaps with physical disabilities. We have the ADA Act that protects folks with mental, emotional disabilities or conditions as well.
Yeah, so one of the things we talked about before we got started was the employers kind of coming
Mhm.
into
Yeah.
discovering, and I think this is really largely because it is affecting the bottom line, it's affecting turnover, and there are,
Mhm.
when there are numbers when you sit at the executive room and there's there are you look at all these metrics every month, every quarter, and, when something gets out of control, or when it starts to go the wrong direction, you got a red number, now
Mhm.
it's red for 1 quarter, 2 quarters, you're gonna start to get a lot of attention on it and trying to figure out what's going on, and if you can't affect
Mm.
change in that room or in that company, then you start to see the red flags come up, right? People start coming out, and it's, I think, probably the
Agreed.
same, like, personal story, right? The company is
Mhm.
ill and are having, they're having challenges and they need to seek help. What are you kind of seeing in your work, and what are the conversations like now?
Yeah, well, by day, I think I was telling you, I'm an employment counselor here for our county
Mhm,
Department of Labor. So I'm assisting folks who are employed and also on public assistance. That's how far,
mhm.
unfortunately, some of these folks have fallen. And so, and some of them have either undisclosed or underdiagnosed or diagnosed barriers to employment that might include a medical condition such as a mental illness.
Okay.
You know what? That's human capital that we cannot afford to, overlook as employers and what have you, and just as a society. Look at the other diversity and equity and inclusion initiatives. I have a friend who's a DEI. That's the big job title these days. We're trying to be more inclusive and diverse and whatnot. Well, that includes folks with disabilities like me.
Yeah.
The job I'm in today is the first time I ever checked off that box. I stopped
Wow.
hiding who I was in the shadows and said, you know what? Maybe I might need an accommodation. There may come a day. I haven't had to ask for one, but I checked that box off. And you don't have to disclose what your diagnosis is. You're just saying, hey, you're laying the groundwork that if you have to have a conversation with your employer, it's not like you did a
Okay.
bait and switch, like, hey, wait a second, Frank, we didn't know anything about this. So,
Yeah, that's interesting. So that's a great conversation around that checkbox as you go through employment,
mhm,
and
sure.
I think everybody would be just absolutely there's no way you're checking that box, yes, right? Like, under what
Mhm,
circumstances? So
right.
it's great to hear that's the circumstance. Now, you've kind of perfectly described when you should, you know, when you have a diagnosis and you wanna be upfront and transparent,
Mhm.
and you may need later on. It'd be great to have that box ticked.
And I think the pandemic, ironically enough, did us a little bit of a favor, ironically enough. I had a
Mm,
political science professor back in college, and he always said, he had that saying where he said, every gray cloud has a silver lining. He
yeah.
said, so the gray cloud of the pandemic, though, I think sensitized employers to, hey, there's a lot of people struggling. It may well have been that CEO of the company who was struggling. They
Oh,
built up this business.
I
All of a sudden, the pandemic is destroying it. Is this something you can relate to? Seeing your face,
oh, like,
uh,
when you said CEOs have struggling, I
yeah,
mean, God, it's like the roughest job on the planet, right? You have 0 friends, no one you can talk to,
yeah,
no
yeah,
one you
yeah,
can
yeah, and you're
trust.
and I think the images that they have to project that image, to the stockholders, the employees. And I think, it makes me think of men in our society and how we're socialized. I
Mm,
um I go to these men's retreats from time to time, and a couple of years ago I took a chance and said, "Hey, you know what? I think I'll do a workshop." I called it "Let's Talk About Mental Health," and I capitalized men. So I put up a thing for folks to sign up, and I go outside to a picnic table so we'll have some privacy and whatnot. And I only had 3 people sign up. And I said, "All right, whatever. It'll be the
yeah,
4 of us." So there's 6 guys at the table. So at the end of the discussion, I said, "Hey, I only had 6 people. I only had 3 people here. How'd you guys get here, if you don't mind me asking? Were you looking for organic chemistry and you came into my class instead by
yeah,
accident?"
yeah, right.
And they were like, "Well, no," they said. we didn't want to put our name on
Didn't
that
want to put my
particular
name.
sign-up sheet. And I'm sitting there going, we're at a men's retreat where it's like, supposed to be that safe space, and yet as men, they still didn't feel safe. That was a real, like a head slap for me. But they came, and I repeated
They
the
came.
workshop a couple of times. They came, they talked, and we made some connections. And on the evaluations, a number of the gentlemen, including one who knew me for a long time, he didn't know my story, and he was really shocked. And I didn't know the full extent of his story either. And he told me how powerful it was and how glad he was that he had stepped forward and came. So, we never know the impact that we might be having.
And that's a really I mean, from that story, that's so true. If you didn't put that up, you'd have lost six conversations. And
Absolutely.
3 of those guys never would have stepped out again, right?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Now they know they can
Um,
put their name down.
it's so true. It's so true. And and there's so many different spheres. I speak to student groups. Recently was at a career event for at my local high school, and I talked to the young people about this aspect of my career journey and how you know there were times where things got too hot, and I quit a job with no job because it was like, oh my God, they're getting too close. They're going to see behind the mask. There's a drug commercial that I can so relate to with the person holding up the paper plate with the smiley face, and that was me. I was in pain, but I cared more about the comfort of others around me at that time. So I didn't want to stink up the joint, as I would tell people,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
be a Debbie Downer. So I'd had this pain I was experiencing, but in, instead I was presenting this mask to everyone, even my family. My mother and my wife were like the only ones who knew, and here I am, a three-time suicide survivor. But now I've put the stuff out there, and that was after 6 years of therapy that it took me to be ready, where I suddenly thought to myself, there was a gentleman I saw who was a speaker at a youth conference named Mike Vanier. He published a book called Transforming Stigma back in 2017, and he challenged folks to be mental health superheroes. That was his term. And I was like, well, what does that mean? He's like, we gotta
Oh, I
stand up and
love
be
that.
counted and let people see us. And I'm like, wow. I was like, there are a vast majority of people who are deathly afraid of speaking public, and yet I do that every day. There are people who can't
Yes.
write, and writing comes fairly easy to me, both fiction and nonfiction. I've actually, my grandsons, I published some children's books thanks to my grandson being my muse. Um, so I spoke to my therapist and I said, I'm thinking about doing this. And she was like wholeheartedly supportive. She goes,
Yeah,
you've
of
got the
course.
skill set, run for it. And then in terms of social media, I don't go on a lot of social media. I'm not crazy about what goes on in a lot of those spaces, unfortunately. Um, but LinkedIn, because of the nature of the work that I do,
Mhm.
and that it's a professional forum, was that's my playground, if you will.
Yeah.
And that's where I'm putting out stuff. And I said, I looked for how this group that I created that you talked about, mental health change agents, came about. Was I was looking for a place where both my people like myself with lived experience and clinicians, people with all the letters behind their
Yeah.
names,
Yeah.
could come together and like share things like, hey, I have a speaking event, or hey, there's this new research on brain imaging. Did you see this? Whatever it might be, or just maybe sharing inspirational messages. Some of us do that too from time to time.
Yeah.
I could not find that sort of space. That doesn't mean it doesn't exist, mind you, but I decided that, well, hey, if it doesn't exist, then I'll create it. And it grew slowly over time. Then all of a sudden, one day, I wake up about 2 years ago, and the request to join exploded. And it just boggles my mind. I think you quoted the stat and said it's like a 500,000 people,
It's
and it's
500
international. So
yeah,
yeah,
543,000 or some crazy number,
yeah,
frankly.
yeah. And I don't know what really happened. I can't say that there was something I did, but it just sort of caught fire. Maybe it reached a critical threshold and it was appearing on people's feeds or something. Maybe
Yeah.
somebody shared it with all of their connections. I don't know, but you know what? I'm grateful and I love it, and I'm trying very hard to have it be an open forum. I have had to have conversations with a very small percentage of people about respect and relevancy. And
Mm.
the best example of that was the person who posted something about selling diamonds, and I'm like, dude, you privately, this is not relevant. I'm all for you, sell your diamonds, but this is not
Diamond.
what belongs here in this space,
Yeah.
you
They
know.
might be a girl's best
Probably.
friend, but
I
yeah.
was like, try, but it's not going to make the cut.
Oh man.
You know.
That
And I'm not trying
yeah.
to, people come from all different perspectives. Some are spiritual, sort of like the 12-step model. I mean, others are, coming from a different perspective.
Yeah. What kind of conversations when you go to a youth group, what's the how's the group found you, or how have they, what's your kind of role there?
It's been a tough group to break into. I have been banging on the doors of local schools, and unfortunately,
Hmm.
it almost seems like it's too hot a topic for many of them to discuss. The colleges
Yeah.
have been a little more receptive. It
Yep.
really depends upon the group and all, and who's invited me. Sometimes there's a connection to a class, and a friend who is a psychology professor at York College, which is
Okay.
part of the New York City University program. So she had me speak to her Psych 101 class, and that was just a
Yeah.
wide-ranging conversation. But other times it's more targeted, like the career talk and how I
Yeah.
injected it as a part of the talk. The other thing I talked to them about was how, there's this illusion that success is a straight line. Or look at
Mm.
me, right? My journey, I did this whole squiggly line for them. It's one of the greatest infographics I use a lot. With
Here's my success
students.
story.
Well, yeah. I'm like, hey, here's my career path, and guess what? This is more or less what it looks like, and that a
Yeah.
lot of the growth and the learning happens in those unexpected twists and turns. I mean,
Mm.
you know, a lot of them, at the high school group, many of them didn't really know what they want to be, and I said to them, that's okay. You know what? You really explore your interests. What do you like to do that you don't get paid
Yeah.
to do? Many people I see during the day at the career center and stuff, they're at an inflection point where I'm saying, gee, maybe this presents you with an opportunity. Within a crisis, there's an opportunity. I think I'm stealing that
Mhm.
from a Chinese proverb or something, but maybe it's a time to reconsider what you've been doing, and maybe there's something you've always wanted to do, and so that happens sometimes, and I try to kind of be a guide on the side. I often use the analogy of GPS. I said, people come in and say, oh, so you're going to get me a job? I'm like, no, no. I'm like, yeah, why would you want me to get you a job? I don't know you that well, Ken. Maybe I'm going to
I
try and get you to be
I
a miner and a coal miner. No, I said, you're going to drive the bus, but I'm going to be alongside you, and I'm going to be like the
yeah.
GPS. Now, I use a GPS analogy purposely because doesn't GPS occasionally guide us amiss? And I say to them, if something I say to you does not ring true, then I want you to discard that. If I do something with
Yeah.
your resume with you and it's not to your liking, this is your document. You own it. This is your life. This is your journey. And it's the same thing when I speak to people with mental illnesses. I see this very much as a civil rights struggle. I've come to see it that way. Uh,
Yeah, that's really kind of
After
explain that
this,
a little bit more.
well, I want to, my aims in telling my story, which is not always flattering, and there are times I get tearful telling that
Mhm.
story about the dark moments that I experienced,
Mm.
and I do. I'm telling real stuff. I want to put a human face on mental illness, and so by me speaking, if that helps people say, "Oh wow, that's interesting. Wow, I didn't know that guy went through that, and look where he is now." And it's not to say I'm at some pinnacle or something like that. I'm just doing my thing now.
Yeah.
I also want to try to be a catalyst for change. I'm planting seeds. I may not be alive to see those seeds fully germinate, but
Yeah.
I'm aiming for a world where the fear, the stigma that silenced me for so long and kept me in pain from asking for help, is reduced at the very least and hopefully eliminated one time. And so that somebody like Frank, instead of having to put that smiley face up and say, "Hey, I'm hurting. Can I get some help?" And when they ask that question, they're treated with dignity. And they don't have to call 26 mental health providers
Yeah.
like I did before they find someone who takes their insurance and is taking new clients. And also, maybe they can find someone that looks like them. During the pandemic, I saw many posts on LinkedIn and other places, articles about people saying, "Hey, where are all the, let's say Black, Latino, what have you? Where are all the diverse providers?" Because sometimes people want someone who they feel can kind of relate to them. You know, you don't have to be a
Absolutely.
horse to be a veterinarian, but for people to be able to find someone they relate to, I think that's super important. So we've got to do something to kind of get that pipeline, encourage people from different backgrounds to consider that as a profession.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough. I think, we can't hire enough therapists fast enough.
Mhm.
And also I think even the system, the college system, the university system, the training, I don't think that that's has the capacity to react to probably as many people that want to get into it now that it's a good paying career, or not good, it's
Mhm.
better paying. At
Scale it
least
up.
it's
Right, right.
right. So at least, you've got there's good financial incentive to get to it. And it's also got, um, it's a very noble kind of a job to do. And I think we need other ways. So it's coming back to we were talking about,
Mhm.
employers
Well,
and schools
peer stuff. Yeah.
and peer support. I just finalized my application, my coursework and application for a
Uh-huh.
peer support specialist in Nevada.
That's beautiful. I love it, Ken.
I'm hoping I was hoping to hear back last week. I think I'll hear back maybe, if not tomorrow, but early next week. Um, and
That's
I'm not
wonderful.
I won't use it, but I I went through it, just to understand what it is and what people go through to get it, and to understand that how legit it's a real, it took some work. It's a real class.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's not a
But who
knockover.
better? Who
Yeah,
better than
and,
a peer, you know?
this is absolutely, and we can have a lot of peers around. Like we can get a lot of peers very easily. It's not that hard of
Yes.
work. It's a bit of work. And it's a
Mhm.
paying job if you wanna do it. I mean, you can actually earn money
Yeah.
from it
I mean, there are
through some of
certificate
the
programs. I think community colleges, are becoming our real
Mm,
engine of our economy in
yeah,
terms of retraining. That's one of the things I wish
I
in
love
terms
that.
of our system with like my department. A lot of the money we get to do the work we do with our local county here is pass through
Mhm.
money from the feds to the state down to the various
Okay.
counties. We have 62 here in
Yes,
New
yeah.
York. Well, I wish there was more for education training because sometimes that's what the person needs is a piece of paper or some skill set that they need,
Yeah.
and that's all that's standing between them and doing some profession like that. And I used it. I'm gonna true confessions. I used it in my own interview. When I was interviewed for this job, I took civil service tests for a number of years, and I kept coming in. Also ran that second place. Well, when
Whoops.
Department of Labor called me, I was so excited, and lo and behold, one of the 3 people interviewing me, and we didn't say anything that we knew each other, but he was the director of that center who knew me as a client. I'd been there 3 times in 15 years because in nonprofits, if the grant runs out, Frank doesn't have a job, or who is it? Frank, Susie, whomever. He saw me bust my buns, and I said it right in that interview. I said, "Hey, look," I said, "I'm sure you have a whole bunch of people with all sorts of credentials and
Yeah.
whatnot that you're considering." I said, "But me," I said, "I sat on the other side of that desk. Who better than me to help somebody navigate it?
Mm,
I can tell them about the mistakes I made and how not to. Don't do this because that really blew up in my face." And I sometimes will share that with certain clients if it's pertinent. I'll say, "Hey, man, you know what? Sometimes they're flagellating themselves or they've got to make a sort of a mental shift, because
yeah.
they're sort of in their own way, or we have to talk about transferable skills because a person often will come in that I'm an accountant or I'm a this or I'm a that. Well, look at AI. a lot of jobs that are being done now either haven't
Whoa.
been created or may be eliminated by technology. It's a real double-edged sword. And so getting people to think in terms of what are your transferable skills and what are the many
Mm,
things that you might do with that you hadn't even imagined. So, but people have to be able to roll with you. And also we've got to get HR personnel people, recruiters to think that way too, because sometimes it seems when you see the ads, and I can sympathize with the job seekers, they want somebody straight out of central casting that you took that straight line to that exact profession. Well, you know what? I backed into nonprofits. I didn't go to
mm,
college studying, working in human services. Through different connections and work I did, suddenly I found myself doing it and finding it very rewarding. And then it was after that that I went and got myself a certificate in nonprofit management,
yeah,
at
it's so
night,
funny.
like 3 some odd years. 'Cause I said, "Well, if I'm gonna be in this field, I might as well kinda know what the heck I'm doing," the specifics of that, the mechanics of that particular field.
Yeah. Yeah, and at least have a checkbox, like you said, that you've gone through it, even though you
Something or
already
other,
know it.
and a lot of people sometimes they look at that kind of thing, "Oh, that makes you a more attractive candidate."
Yeah.
I've had people say that to me, who are, and I'm not trying to beat up on clinicians or professionals and whatnot, but I was prepared for it. It was probably about the 3rd talk I gave. It was for the Chamber of Commerce here in my town, and there was a gentleman from our state Office of Mental Health, and there it was, bang. "So what are your credentials, Mr. Pomata, to be promulgating this information?" Da, 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 da. Well, I don't have a whole bunch of letters behind my names. I have a master's in education, though, so I know how to present a thing. But then I pointed to my slides, and I'm all about citing the sources of where I get my stuff. I said, gee, I'm showing you stuff from the World Health Organization. I'm showing you stuff
Mm,
from CDC. I said, I'm fairly certain that the information I'm presenting, whether or not I'm an authentic messenger, I think as a person with lived experience,
yeah.
number one, just as authentic as somebody who's got all this paper training behind them and all these, like I said, letters behind the name. But I'm presenting with information that I feel is I feel like I can rely upon it and it's valid. And if I
Mm,
find out later on that it's not, then I'm going to tell you so. But I'm fairly confident when I put something up there from the World Health Organization that it's probably reliable, or at least that's the best information we have now. It's basically
yeah.
learned that during the pandemic. It's a moving target. It's not exact. It's a, the research in mental health has come a long way. You know,
Yeah,
we've got the
it's
biomedical model now, which is very predominant, but even that's changing.
that's changing. Yeah, and like you said, the data, I mean, since COVID, I think the data is moving so fast that
Hmm.
it's really
Absolutely.
hard. I had a conversation with an HR professional at a pretty large hotel,
Hmm.
and this individual shared with me that since COVID, things have radically changed for them. Um, they
Yes.
have,
Yes.
just the attitude of employees at the workplace, especially candidates. Very strange. People will confirm on a Thursday, take the call, accept the job, fax back everything, have gone through 2 or 3 interviews, and supposed to come to work on Friday morning, and no show, no call, no email,
Ghosting.
never answer
I've been hearing
emails.
about this. Yes,
Yeah,
I've been
just
hearing about this.
complete ghosting is a real thing now, which the he said, I've never," once in a blue moon, and we talk about it
Yeah.
the whole
Yeah.
year. We'll talk about it the whole year, and he's, "Remember that person?
It's
Remember."
it's kind of
But
baffling
now
to me. Yeah.
it's a real
The
thing now.
the usually I hear it from the other end is that the employers, in that honeymoon phase where they're courting you as a candidate and whatnot, uh,
Oh,
the person I was counseling today, she's like, "That place you told me to apply to where you knew somebody and you said I could use your name in the
yeah,
letter and say, Frank strongly encouraging you to apply." She goes, "They called me." She goes, "But," and I returned the call, "but they haven't called me back." I says, "I've done hiring." I said, "Sometimes there's one position and there's a pile of 60 resumes."
yeah,
I said, "Look, celebrate the small win that you got the call, and you're gonna
yeah,
have to be patient." I said, "And I know you're." That's one of the challenges of today's job search. I mean, the last time I walked into a place and landed a job was in 1998. It is not that world anymore.
No.
Everything is going into cyberspace. Now, when I was doing hiring, at one point in time, worked for a large university that used this automated system. I spoke to the HR department. I said, I at least want to give the person a hit back that says, Frank, we received your resume, and then give them a timeline. We're going to be in touch with the qualified candidates
Mm.
within this time frame, whatever it might be. Let's just say 2 weeks, 3 weeks, what have you. This way, they know it got to where it needed to get to, and they've got a
Yep.
timeline. And they're not just sitting there hanging with their tongues out. Because I've talked to so many job seekers throughout the day where they're like, it went into this black hole, and I don't even know if anybody saw it. Did it make it past the bots? That's what some of the training that I'm doing now is how to kind of format your resume to get
Mm.
past the. Sometimes many of the companies are using these automated systems to do their hiring that filter the resumes, and the only ones that HR might see is if it doesn't have certain keywords is the thing. And so I'm trying to sort of train the folks how to kind of, have a bot friendly resume. I mean, it's crazy, but that's the world we're living in. So we've got to kind of
That's wild.
twist and jive, and even just getting people to create a LinkedIn profile. I mean, many of them
Mm.
are kind of scared by the, oh my God, I don't know what that's all about. I said, look, you're going to Google the employer. They're going to probably Google you. They're going to do their due diligence. What do you want them to
Yeah.
see? Your Facebook page and partying with
N-
your kids in the backyard? Well, that's all wonderful
No.
and all, but even
No.
after they see this, and a lot of times I'll show them mine, and I'll say, look, don't be intimidated by this. I've been working on this for like, 15, 20 years, what have you. I said, but get a skeleton up of some sort, at least something,
Mm.
because the algorithms are such that that'll probably be one of the first things that'll come up in the search result that the employer sees, and it's your professional persona. And
Yeah.
there's so much more you can put on there than on a paper resume.
This is so true. Yeah. LinkedIn has been great. It's been a great tool. I think if
It
you know
really
how to
has.
engage with.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I credit the folks who created it. I really do. They did a good thing there. They're
What do you
harnessing
what
the power of networking.
What are you thinking about? What's on your mind for, what's next? You kind of had this
For
I think
for me or the field, what?
well, kind of I'll lay it out there. So, I think you went through your journey. You kind of had a good come to Jesus moment with yourself. Um,
Yes, I did.
you you started the therapy. You come out of that, you've got a new sense of purpose, and you're in the maybe for lack of a better word, the salvation game. I don't know what I'm going. I've got religious analogies.
Wow. Wow, man.
I I started our conversation with the war analogy offline, and now I'm going to spiritual. You know, you're you're down there really at the trenches helping one by one, right? And you're
Yeah.
impacting people in this way, and you're doing the talks. Um, and you've got the page with a good following now. What are you thinking about? What's next? Are you having those? Are you kind of in the zone right now, or you've got something else cooking in the back of your mind?
Well, it's a combination of things. It's doing talks like this.
Mhm.
I've written articles and published them either
Good.
online or with some organization. There isn't a real grand plan, so to speak, but I think the group is really the forum where a lot of that stuff is
Yeah.
happening. And trust me, I'm still going through my journey. I am not done with
Y y
therapy. And I sing the praises of my therapist. Uh,
y
you know,
you are
we talked about living a double life, right? So I
yeah.
decided that I did some research and I said, oh, cognitive behavioral therapy. That sounds like the right approach for me. Well, the first meeting I have with this woman who I took on, she says, I want you to keep a journal. Now, for a person who's lived this double life, I looked at her like she just like scared the crap out of me. I was like, "You want me to do what?" And she saw the fear in my face, and I said to her, I said, "My deepest, darkest thoughts on paper?
Yeah, it's like,
Are
are
you
you in s
crazy?" Yeah. And here's what she said to me. I love it, and I was just like, "Oh, she gets me." She
I
said,
love that.
"I'll tell you what. You can say your first entry can be, Hillary wants me to keep a journal, and I really don't want to, or something along those lines. Well, guess what? That was my first entry. I begrudgingly, about a year later, said to her, I said, "You know something?" I said, I really didn't want to do this, and yet it I said, "I have to say to you that it has been a useful process. It has helped
I love it.
me gain some insights and discern patterns that I might not have had I not put them on
Mm,
paper, and or made plans." She also credits me that a big part of what I've been doing is educating myself. And,
okay.
sometimes I put articles that I've annotated in red or green ink to sort of stick out from the printed thing. And she'll go, "You have a clean copy of this?" She goes, "I love this." But a lot of times I'll actually cite the hyperlink where I got it. And so she'll copy that down or what have you, or she'll make a copy of the thing. She goes, "You're my only client that gives me homework."
I love.
And you know, I'm not a person who does things halfway. If I once I made that decision and made that commitment, I was in with both feet. And I
Yeah.
am. And you know, who knows what is around that corner? I mentioned I'm a grandfather, and I want to bequeath a world that is different from the one that I found. And I think we're
Mm,
getting there. And I don't want to overblow my role in any way, shape, or form. I was flattered by the words you said, but I'm planting little seeds here. Um, I don't know if it's one by one, believe it or not, because think about it. The power of LinkedIn is a force multiplier, if we're going to use the
oh
analogy
yeah.
of Cole Powell. And so that is really helping me get the message out and helping me to help others, just as your podcast is
Mm,
magnifying my voice. I might only be talking to people in my small circle or on LinkedIn
yeah.
and whatnot. Yet through your podcast, I know I'm going to reach people, and who knows what might come out of that. I've actually had people approach me to monetize that group, and I have absolutely
Mm,
flat out refused it. In other words, hey, give me your list, and you can make so much money. You're sitting on a gold mine. Literally, these are the pitches I've got, and I finally had to put it in the group rules, which I guess people aren't always reading, but I said, that to me would be a betrayal of what this group is about. I said, I know that I would be bothered by getting solicitations. I said, this group, again,
oh yeah.
safe space. And so I
Yeah.
take my role as the facilitator of that. And when I say facilitator, it's not that active facilitation. I'm not guiding the conversation. I'm creating a town square, is how I see it.
Yeah. Yeah. You've created a giant town
So,
square.
yeah. And you know what? Let the conversations rip, and whatever comes out of it, hopefully it's good stuff, you know,
I
it's
love. Yeah.
connections. And I think, it is similar, akin, I think, to what you're doing, but really I wanna see a brighter future for people with mental illnesses or these invisible disabilities, as we might call them, so that will be perceived and treated differently.
Mm.
That's so.
And, and like you said, a Disabilities Act, a chance we're 10 years behind the Disabilities Act for relatively for mental
Mhm,
health,
mhm,
especially in the workplace. And I
yeah,
think, you know, just seeing how many people click on that to join that group. And then if I mean, I encourage anybody, if you're, watch this, we'll have the links in the bottom and everything. If you hear this on the audio version, thanks for sticking around. In the bottom of the this episode, we'll have a link to that page as well on all the audio
great.
platforms. So,
Thank
so
you.
people can go and just scroll through and you just see what a day's postings in there. It's bananas. I mean, like you said, it's the whole
It runs
spectrum
the
of
gamut. It really runs the gamut. Yeah.
it runs a gamut. It is, like you said, it's faith-based to 12 steps to universe stuff and love and hope.
Or
And it's just
clinicians, research. I've
and a bunch of
Yeah,
documents in there that are really good. Yeah. It is really cool stuff.
collaborations have come out of that too. Ask people to introduce themselves and say why usually. And a number of
Oh,
people do. Well, I got a contact from a woman in the UK named Allison. We've done 4 webinars, podcasts together. She is a brain Alzheimer's specialist and whatnot, but we've done a couple of collaborative things. And that's a beautiful
awesome.
thing. I never would have met Allison otherwise. Now I even am connected to her husband because one day we got into a conversation. She told me he does cross-cultural stuff. It's kind of like DEI scaled up to spanning the globe. And
Oh my
um,
gosh.
so I went on his page and I'm like, wow, man, you're doing some interesting stuff. And he's like, hey, I know you. He goes, my wife's face lights up every time she talks about stuff you guys are doing together. He said, I'm so happy you guys are. I was like, oh, good. I'm glad he's not jealous.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Professional
She's a
jealousy.
right, right. She's a wonderful lady, and listen, we never would have connected across the
Yeah,
Atlantic
yeah, that's just
Ocean
amazing thing.
had it not been for this space in which, like you, she approached me and said, "Hey, you know, it's a really interesting thing." And it was like it was last November. It was the first time she reached out to me, and she said, "I have this idea. Would you be interested in it?" I'm like, "All right, what the heck?"
Let's
You
do
know, as
it.
long as we don't blow the house up, you know, I'm pretty open to it.
Frank, awesome conversation. Uh,
Thank
and people can find you, I think, very easily on LinkedIn.
yes.
I think there's not too many Pomatas on there somehow. Some
We're a
good New
small
York.
tribe, yes. I have
Of,
Sardinia and Sicily.
is that what it is? I was like, there's something with that name
That's
because
where we
I
are.
Google there's
That's
yeah. Okay.
the island there's a
Okay.
small island off of Sicily called the Isle de San Pietro, and that's where you'll find most of the pomatas. Here in the
Pomata.
United
Oh
States,
man.
not so many.
Uh,
One day I'll
now
make
you're
a
just
pilgrimage there, and
oh,
then
you
mom's people
absolutely.
come from Sicily, so that's why I like seafood. I'm an island guy.
So good. That's so good. So like I mentioned, you can find Frank and all the stuff he's doing on LinkedIn, and then of course through the mental health change agents, agents of change.
Yep, change agents is
Um,
fun. Yep, mental health
yeah,
change agents.
yeah, and I think you pop that in, it on LinkedIn especially, it'll pop up. It's
Yeah,
the only
absolutely.
group like that with that vernacular, and then it's also a pretty large one, so it pops up immediately. Frank, hang on for 30 seconds. I got a little exit
Okay.
commercial thingy. Thanks everybody for listening and supporting mental health today. If you love this episode, try to find us if you're listening on an audio program. Go down and give us a nice rating. We really appreciate those. Helps us kind of keep the mission going. Let's see anything else, and find us on the jar.live, and you'll have a chance to see the making of the jar right here. Frank, hang on. I'll see you in 30 seconds.
Okay.
Yeah, loose, baby.
We're about to go and make this vessel with these great professionals in public glass. We're not part of the community, but we're from the outer family of glass blowing. Yeah, we're gonna go make a magical giant jar with optic lenses so that if you turn it, it changes all the time. So if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
All right.
Somewhere in there.
Well, I guess in the
It's
words
trying.
of Matthew McConaughey, all right, all right, all right. This was
Yeah,
a great conversation, Ken. Thank you
and
so much
somehow
for having me on.
hang on, somehow we're still alive. It's still
We
trying to
are
end it.
still alive. Oh, great. Okay.
Let's see.